last night... You get a cough?
Of course, when we start recording, I need to cough.
Well, you did last night, too.
I did.
So last night, we stayed up late. We gave up our evening, our health, in order to record an hour-long podcast that we were both pretty happy with. We touched on some stuff. Not that creepy video that you recommended, TJ. We'll get to that a different time. It disturbed us, though. Know that. But then we got done and we checked out the audio only to realize that we'd been recording with the laptop's mic instead of our nice mic. And it was awful. We thought it was salvageable, but we tried listening to it this morning before we posted. And it sounded like we were talking out of a can and that there was a dryer in the background and maybe some marbles rolling around at some point.
We don't have any marbles and there's no dryer in our living room. So it really didn't make any sense.
We don't even know why it was so bad.
I have no clue where all that white noise came from. It's very bad. The high quality mic is much muy bueno.
Yeah, and at some point we're going to get me my own mic, and then hopefully it'll be even better. But what our podcast last night was on, we talked a little bit about, what's his name? Mark Phillips.
And Kathy O'Brien.
Yeah.
Because we went down the MK Ultra rabbit hole.
Which I think we started there, but I watched a video from Jay Meyer's documentaries earlier in the day, talking about some creepy serial killer you've never heard of, that I'd never heard of. And apparently, Kathy O'Brien claimed to have been married to him at one point and said all sorts of creepy things about him. And from there, I mentioned that I don't doubt MK Ultra. I mean, obviously it happened, and I don't doubt some of the things that we believe about it. But I would have a very hard time taking someone with that kind of trauma at their word, because you'd never know if you were getting the truth. And apparently some people claim that they can deprogram these people and that they can get to the truth. But I don't think that you ever could take someone's word or truly believe that you got to the bottom. You'd always have to treat them with a little bit of suspicion, because you could always just be lied to, if they were, programmed to. I'm getting a little.
That movie Split?
Yeah.
Right, the movie Split. Well, that's based on two books that I intend to buy someday. It seems like last time I looked, they were expensive or
hard to find.
Out of print. Yeah, they're out of print. But it's based on two books written by a psychiatrist or a psychologist who studied this guy named Billy Milligan. It's called The Minds of Billy Milligan, the book is. And that movie was actually based on this real-life dude who had something like 32 alters of personalities. And is it alluded to in the movie in Split, where at the end he has even more alters that they don't talk about?
Maybe. I think in the movie The Psychiatrist, I thought she said he had like 24 personalities. Or that she was finding out about more all the time. Or she hadn't met them all. Hey, go away, cat. I don't want your tail floofing up near the mic.
Anyway, in the real life story, this guy, Billy Milligan, he commits a murder, allegedly. And they put him away. And they do all kinds of, he claims he didn't do it. And they start, asking him questions, and they do a polygraph test, and they try and get the truth out of him, and he's really emphatic that he has absolutely zero recollection of performing whatever he did. And our cat is going to make a bunch of noise.
Can you just unplug the laptop? Or will it be fine if it's unplugged?
He's fine.
Okay.
Who cares about some clicks? It's much better than the audio from last night.
Okay.
Anyway, so since this guy was so emphatic, and it really did seem like he was telling the truth, that he had nothing to do with this murder, they started trying to really figure out what happened. Because it was kind of implicit. Like, he was implicated in this murder.
Okay, can you get him out of here? I don't want him to floof his tail.
Come here, cat. Come here.
Got some claws on him.
Yep. So the more they talk to this guy, the more they realize there's something hinky going on with his mind. And they discover that the person who committed the murder was one of his alters. He had dissociative identity disorder, like heavy duty case of it. And I don't think those books ever talk about MK Ultra, but it's real indicative of what they try to achieve in the programs. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of person they want to create, because the more alters they have, they form the alters when the new fracture of the mind is formed. The new person, they like train them to be certain people. Mm-hmm. Like one person, they'll keep him in a certain altar for years, and they'll train him to be an assassin. Mm-hmm. And that's not you. You're whoever you were before this all happened to you. But when they bring that altar forward, it's a distinct person. It's a completely different person who's an assassin. And they are trained to go do things for an organization. And you have no idea about it. There's people who tell stories of how they're like... they'll like get up and start their day, and they won't be wearing the same clothes they went to bed, and they'll feel super exhausted all day. And they find out years later that every night they were going out and doing stuff, but they don't remember doing it. That's their alter taking over during like the sleep hours to go do stuff.
Well, and those stories are all over pop culture now, as people have latched onto it.
Right, and well, they're stemmed in reality, and I believe most of it comes from these MK Ultra programs. I know I'm deviating from where we intended to go, but I can't just reiterate what I said all last night.
No. Well.
Anyway, we should probably find these books and read them, because they sound super fascinating.
Also sound creepy. I tend to think that some of this isn't being manufactured in a government lab. I think some of it is demon possession or demon influence. And that cat is going to knock things around the floor in a minute. He's way too excited. But where I was going with that was that led us to a different rabbit hole, because you mentioned that some people think Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips are in fact controlled,
like handler and victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of, okay, so this exists, but we're only going to let you know as much as we want to with these two people.
Right. A lot of people think that Mark Phillips, he's passed away now, and we just found this out yesterday, that he had died in 2017, but we couldn't figure out a cause of death. Like, we tried to find out why, but he was an old guy, so I suspect it was just a heart attack or whatever.
Well, and that begs the question also, what happened to Kathy, because apparently she was living with him?
Yeah.
Along with a young woman.
Right, and that's what a lot of our podcasts last night that we aren't publishing now was about.
And that was the rabbit hole we dug down. My question is always, why are these people allowed to be out there spouting these questions unless people think they're not believable, or they're being allowed to for some reason. But when I was looking up, is Kathy, what's her name? O'Brien. Kathy O'Brien still controlled, or something to that effect. I came across a Reddit talking about her, and someone said, I don't trust her and her story ever since I saw this video. And it was a video from 3 girls in this family whose sister apparently had gone to live with Kathy and Mark for some reason. Single woman going to live with an apparently married couple.
Did we ever track down the reason why she went? Because the parents claimed that they bought her a ticket to go find them.
Her parents say that she went to work for them. Which, doing what?
Administrative work. Well, I mean, they went on speaking tours and had book tours and book signings and whatever. It makes some sense that they wanted an assistant to do the book work.
It's still exceptionally creepy.
Yeah, it's weird.
There is no good situation with a pretty young woman living with a couple who are not her parents. You know?
Yeah, it's
odd. So the gist of the video from the sisters are that their sister, who claims to have been abused by her father and kept under control, wasn't allowed to go to school, controlled what she ate, she was actually perfectly fine, had a good relationship with her parents. She claimed they were Mormon. They said they weren't Mormon. They were all homeschooled and all given the opportunity to go to school. She didn't want to go to school. She didn't want to go to college, according to the sisters. And they all say they haven't spoken to her in about 8 years. and they linked to a video, which their video was to rebut, of Kathy and Mark having an interview with some weird German conspiracy channel.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was a super weird video. We watched parts of it. We skipped through it a little bit because it was very long.
Yeah, but there were definitely bits in there where it seemed like she had canned responses.
She looked stoned.
Yeah. Whenever they asked her questions, she would kind of just stare off into space and have this canned, rehearsed response.
Which, so apparently she was a model when she was young. That's something I didn't talk about last night. Apparently she's a model, but for a model she has a terrible camera presence. Terrible. She sits there like she's, been tacked to the chair. And frequently during the interview, Mark Phillips answers for her. Which is, we mentioned, is something that you would do in a submissive relationship. Like, I would let you answer things, for me if I just didn't feel like it. Or, if you had the better answer, or we were in a situation where I wasn't really comfortable with someone. But she should not be in a submissive relationship with someone who's not her husband, her father, otherwise related to her.
Yeah, it's super bizarre because their stories are so contradictory.
And Mark is answering questions about her childhood.
Yeah.
Like, he would know better than her.
That's because he does, because it's a fabricated story.
Well, anyway, so you can find both videos by looking up the Millers. Millers, is that their name?
Yeah, the Miller family.
Shayla Miller and Kathy O'Brien, Mark Phillips. So, I don't know.
The family believes that she's a victim of mind control.
By Mark Phillips.
Right, yeah. They believe that Mark Phillips is the bad guy in this situation. Where, if anybody listening knows anything about Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips, Kathy O'Brien is a recovered, in big quotations, recovered MK Ultra victim. And Mark Phillips was the guy that brought her out of that and saved her and helped her see the light. And they've written a book called Transformation of America, and they've been going around for years and years and years blowing the whistle on this evil government
they both
operation.
Lived into their middle-late age.
Right. If it was such a big secret, and then the CIA took pains to destroy all the documentation so no one knew the extent of the program, why weren't they suicided? You know what I mean?
So the other thing is that the girls claim that their father sought out contact with Mark Phillips because he believed in government conspiracies and he was interested in the subject and he wanted to talk to this guy who'd apparently saved a woman from mind control.
Right.
But the story the sister tells that, well, my parents were afraid of losing control over me, so they sought out Mark.
Oh, because we were deeply religious, and my father used that to control me.
But he was losing control of me, so he sought out this guy who claimed to save people from mind control in order to get tips on how to keep controlling me. But then he let me go and live with them, and bought me a plane ticket to go live with them.
And now I'm liberated from them.
It's just super creepy, and it doesn't seem weird to ring true.
Yeah.
And
I definitely fall inside of believing the three sisters and their candid video that they put out to expose them.
I'm sure a body language does she go by Bombard Ghost body language, or is it Ghost body language now?
Something Ghost. She had to change her name because she got.
Well, the body language lady, she'd probably have fun with those videos. To me, as a girl who did not like Christine Blasey Ford's testimony and thought it stank to high heavens, it looked the sisters looked genuine to me.
Yeah. And
Shayla looked like she was just out of it.
Controlled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sedated.
Yes.
So that was something we talked about for a while. I think we talked about it longer than we needed to. But was there anything you wanted to add to that? Did you want to touch on the what MK Ultra was again?
Yeah, I probably should recap just in case there's any pardon the term, normies who are listening. Because if you know about this stuff a lot, you're weird like us.
Yeah, I told you that years ago, my sister, somehow it came up and I mentioned MKUltra and she said, Eleanor, you've been listening to too much Alex Jones. I said, no, this is something we know happened and probably still does, but they were so eager to cover it up that they torched the files.
Yeah, it's bad news. Pardon me. I'd like to read this whole thing, but I'll just read the part I read last night, because this is a pretty good breakdown of the whole thing. So,
I love how you scroll past it as you're talking about it.
I know, I'm just reading other stuff, pardon me. So I'll read this brief thing. It says, a brief introduction to all that is known of the program with any certainty, aside from what's been declassified, was given in opening remarks by Senator Ted Kennedy at the 1977 U.S. Senate MKUltra hearings. So this is the whole article that I have pulled up. Hang on. The whole article I have pulled up has all kinds of interesting tidbits, but this, since it's a direct quote from a congressional hearing type situation, gives you a lot more concrete truth as to what was going on than most things that you can read, unless you're going to go find the actual declassified material that the government has released and is part of the public record.
I gave you a look, so I was afraid you were going to lose your spot again.
It's not that long of an article. I can find it.
It looks like it.
So I'll just start at the top. It says, some 2 years ago, the Senate Health Subcommittee heard chilling testimony about the human experimentation activities of the Central Intelligence Agency. The deputy director of the CIA revealed that over 30 universities and institutions were involved in an extensive testing and experimentation program, which included covert drug tests on unwitting citizens at all social levels, high and low, Native Americans and foreign. Several of these tests involved the administration of LSD to unwitting subjects in social situations. At least one death, that of Dr. Olson, resulted from these activities. The agency itself acknowledged that these tests made little scientific sense. The agents doing the monitoring were not qualified scientific observers. The test subjects were seldom accessible beyond the first hours of the test. In a number of instances, the test subject became ill for hours or days, and effective follow-up was impossible. Other experiments were equally offensive. For example, heroin addicts were enticed into participating in LSD experiments in order to get a reward. Heroin. Perhaps most disturbing of all was the fact that the extent of the experimentation on human subjects was unknown. The records of all these activities were destroyed in January 1973 at the instruction of the then CIA Director Richard Helms, in spite of persistent inquiries by both the Health Subcommittee and the Intelligence Committee. No additional records or information were forthcoming, and no single individual could be found who remembered the details. Not the director of the CIA who ordered the documents destroyed, not the official responsible for the program, nor any of his associates. Sudden onset amnesia concerning classified material. We believe that the record, incomplete as it was as complete as it was going to be. Then one individual, through a Freedom of Information request, accomplished what two U.S. Senate committees could not. He spurred the agency into finding additional records pertaining to the CIA's program of experimentation with human subjects. These new records were discovered by the agency in March. Their existence was not made known to the Congress until July. The records reveal a far more extensive series of experiments than had previously been thought. 86 universities or institutions were involved. New instances of unethical behavior were revealed. The Intelligence Committee of this nation, which requires a shroud of secrecy in order to operate, has a very sacred trust from the American people. The CIA's program of human experimentation of the 50s and 60s violated that trust. It was violated again in the day that the bulk of the agency's records were destroyed in 1973. It is violated each time a responsible official refuses to recollect the details of the program. So that's pretty a pretty damning thing to say in front of a bunch of people about anybody who was running this operation. This was only 4 years after they destroyed the files.
Well, you have to wonder what happened to that CIA director after he retired.
Yeah. Maybe he met with a sudden onset case of death.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out. This article goes on and says, after the program was terminated, many of the victims attempted to take legal action against organizations involved in MK Ultra. In 1980, 9 former patients began a class action lawsuit against the CIA, settling in 1988 for just over $80,000 each. 77 of those subjected to MK Ultra experiments in Canada were offered a compensation by the Canadian government in 1992, but many more were denied compensation, and some later brought their own lawsuits. Another Canadian, Gene Steele, launched legal action in 2015, receiving 100,000 Canadian dollars 2 years later. So that's in 2017. Somebody was awarded 100,000 Canadian bucks.
I thought that was 2015.
It said he was awarded it 2 years later.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of MK Ultra, so they're still paying out money to victims of this thing. It's a real it's an ironclad thing, and anybody who says that it's woo and fake and conspiracy theory has got something wrong with their minds, because it is.
They're just not willing to look into it enough, which is funny though, because just below that I saw a heading that said in woo mythology.
Yeah, it goes on. This is a pretty good article, I think. I haven't read it completely, but it goes on to talk about the speculations and whatnot, and that's kind of what we do.
Yeah. Well, what we have talked about before is that, because we watched a video yesterday from a channel that I don't like, on how mental institutions were shut down. And make of that, what you want. We have mixed feelings on that. I think we've talked before about how some states down south will buy tickets for their troublemakers, send them to Alaska because it's so expensive to get back.
Yep.
And we've got a growing homeless population here.
Well, there's this really dumb thing where it's too expensive. Homeless people are too poor to afford a ticket back, but the tickets are affordable enough for someone who wants to get rid of them. They're not allowed to fly because they don't have the right documentation. Mm-hmm. They're not allowed to go through Canada because they can't get a passport. Mm-hmm. So it's like impossible to get rid of them once they're here unless you want to foot the bill or I want to foot the bill to put them back on the ferry. It's pretty underhanded.
Well, I wasn't trying to go there. I was talking about emptying out the mental institutions. You have to wonder how much of that had secret MK experimentation going on. And we mentioned it the other day, that's what the plot of Sucker Punch is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about female empowerment, and I don't know why anyone would think it is, but when you look up what is Sucker Punch about, you come up with female empowerment crap. Like, you're still reading.
Yeah, it's an interesting article.
We should probably really
Sorry,
I'll
stop reading that.
Episode.
Yeah, we'll get more into it. Apparently, Project Monarch, that article just read, they claim that there's no scholarly concrete evidence for Project Monarch ever existing. So anybody who studies MK Ultra has not found its relationship with Project Monarch, which is like an offshoot. It was like the later offshoot that people believe the Illuminati operates. And that's where the beta kittens and why you see so much butterfly imagery all over popular culture. And the unicorn thing, I think, probably comes out of that. And the pizza thing, all these images and symbols, those are like new co-opted symbols, the unicorns and pizza things. But the monarch butterflies is the old school one. It's been around a lot of years. Well,
yeah, but you have to wonder at a certain point, not everyone can be in on that. And you get a lot of professional photographers who will copy someone else's style. And, oh, hey, look at Britney's covering her eye in this photo. Why don't we try for that? We'll go with this angle over here.
Yeah, for your prom photos or whatever.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there are a lot of Disney stars that have photos with butterflies. Even dudes, like the guy who had the "He will not divide us" cam. There's a really weird photo of him looking like he's about to burst into tears, surrounded by butterflies.
I love that guy.
Ugh.
He makes the rest of us look normal.
Yeah. But something we talked about, I think, a episode or so ago, we were talking about Epstein and how you have to wonder if he's just one of many such recruiters, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if-
he could very easily have been the recruiter for the current project's like sexual. I was gonna say wing, but division is probably a better. You know, they have their sexual slaves and they're mind controlled. They'll do whatever you want.
Yeah.
They'll be whoever you want. You know, they can change their alters into behaving however they've forced them to learn how to behave. So maybe my theory was that maybe he's not doing his job anymore. And so they're outing him out as a pedophile because a pedophile, as weird as this sounds, putting a pedophile in jail is less damaging to them than having their whole operation exposed in creating these slaves, these mind slave people. You know what I mean?
I suppose, but he doesn't seem all that worried from stuff I've been seeing. So you have to assume he's probably going to be convicted, and I bet he disappears and we never hear about him again.
Oh yeah, and then somebody will do an expose. Nowadays, 85-year-old Jerry Epstein spends his days shuffling around the library in the local penitentiary. He's lived a long, sordid life, the poor man, but now he's working to rebuild himself into a scholarly man who just enjoys his books and blah blah. You know, the puff piece about how it's real sad this happened to a once great man or whatever, even though he's as icky as he is. They did that with. I always think of this dumb puff piece they had on Saddam Hussein. Whatever, there's conspiracies around him, but whatever you think, the dude was not nice. He wasn't a nice guy. And then there was this exactly the same candor in like style. Nowadays, old Saddam Hussein. Here's a picture of him and his being grandfatherly and looking foppish, shuffling around in his orange jumpsuit and reading his books, and he just spends his days hanging out here doing this thing. Like, oh, poor him. Come on, you're killing me. You're killing me.
Yeah, well, I completely lost my train of thought, thanks.
I derailed it again.
But, no, I'm sure that, something else was going on in that island, and, I don't... How big is that island, anyway?
It can't be that big. I mean, it doesn't look that big. We've all seen the photos from the air. The roads aren't little tiny lines, you know? You could probably spot a vehicle.
Okay, well, the only building I've ever seen pictures of was the Weird Temple.
Oh, yeah, nobody posts videos of the, well, you've seen the sundial, which is just down the hill from there. No? Oh, you didn't watch that entire drone footage?
No, I was doing dishes. I was just listening.
Oh, yeah, that drone footage that has been floating around the internet. The drone actually zooms up on like a sundial, a big sundial with numbers. You know, from the air, it looks like a clock.
No, you're right. I did see that.
Yeah, it's just down the hill from there, and then there's a tennis court right nearby as well. At least we think it's a tennis court because Google Maps claims it is. That's another weird thing. We talked about this on the last episode, but I'll reiterate. Google Maps shows a tennis court. The drone footage shows a flat gravel field, and I think Apple's map program shows something altogether different, like a walking garden.
Well,
in this big square spot. It's weird.
So yeah, like I mentioned though, a couple people I listened to were assuming that the drone footage might be old, and that it had just been re-uploaded recently.
Right.
But you said that you thought that maybe the temple was just a cover for an elevator.
Yeah, I heard that recently, and it makes sense because it's a small building with a dome on it that could easily just be a fancy cover for a big vent, and it looks like an elevator, the top of an elevator shaft to me. You know, a vent. Oh, under the dome there could be a vent and the motor that operates the big electrical motor and a spool of cable that operates the elevator.
Yeah.
That could be all that's in there. It's just an elevator, nothing else.
Well, so to kind of spin off a little bit into what we actually intended this episode to be about before the disaster of last night's episode, we were going to talk about some of the creepy businesses that people have tried to or suspect strongly could be linked to pedophilia. Like Voodoo Donuts, and of course the pizzeria that shall go unnamed allegedly. And what was the other one? Oh, Sweet Baby Jesus? Or Sweet Jesus.
Is it called Sweet Jesus?
Look it up. I'm pretty sure it's called something like that.
Alright, you know what the search query will be for this?
Oh.
I'm gonna look up...
Oh, Little Baby's Ice Cream. I was mixing up the names.
I'm gonna look up Satanic...
Ice Cream?
Chicago...
Is it Chicago?
Ice Cream.
Why did I think it was Canadian?
Ice Cream.
I think it's Canadian.
Shop. Let's see. Sweet Jesus.
Okay. Regardless. So we were going to talk about those things, and you made me think of that with your elevator theory, because whenever people talk about, places with child trafficking and such, they talk about underground tunnels. And of course, I've heard that was what the theory was back during the Satanic Panic that people make fun of nowadays with schools, as people thought, apparently, back in, what was it, the 80s or 90s?
It was the 80s.
Okay, that schools were trafficking children or abusing them, and it was all Satanists and stuff like that. And they make fun of that now when you talk about conspiracies involving, child trafficking, pedophilia, Pizzagate, and all that. And I propose to you that Satanic Panic that people made fun of back then, it was... Yeah, there was no evidence for it because I've never looked into it, that it was just a psyop to prep people for what they were really doing in case it ever came out, so that people would scoff.
Yeah, it's a good theory. I mean, if a bunch of people are freaking out about a thing that they have a bunch of concrete evidence for, and they expose it, but then it gets clamped down on real hard, the next time it comes around, it's like double jeopardy. No one's gonna think twice about it. Like, oh, that's not true. We debunked that years ago. You guys are all crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good theory.
And what's worse is
and now they can come out, and no one's going to say anything.
Well, what's kind of worse is that... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, the Satanic Church is in the media. They have, like, a Twitter account, and they have good public relations, and they're philanthropists. And,
have you seen that guy, Lucian Graves?
Yeah, they're always coming out and saying all kinds of stuff about how good the Satanic Church is. They're actually atheists. They're not really into Satanism. They're not really talking about Satan, as it were. They're just atheists, blah, blah, blah. Here, come to our fundraiser so we can pay for the local kids' basketball team to go to state or whatever. You know what I mean?
No, what they want to do is they go and they sue people until they can get a... Satanist club in the school, because there's a Christian club, and they sue so they can get their Baphomet statue put up next to the Ten Commandments. And there's a good interview out there of Tucker Carlson interviewing this guy who obviously has a fake name, and the guy just makes your skin crawl.
Crazy eyes for sure. He's got the Heaven's Gate crazy eyes going.
No, he's got a damaged eye. Gotta wonder if he did that intentionally?
Oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah, he does have a jacked up eye, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that Tucker Carlson calls him a snake.
I don't know. He's always got good names for people.
He insults him in a really funny way, but the guy's super creepy. And there's definitely something demonic hanging around him. But what I was going to say when you were mentioning that is that I wouldn't be surprised at all if all of that is just like... soft preparation for, getting people more and more used to it. That's all over the media is witches are good. Witches are actually on the side of people trying to get rid of, demons and scary monsters. That's always what happens. Really, you had to look up a picture of the guy?
Dude's a stud.
Yeah, right. I bet you that's a contact.
You think I don't know. Even his candid photos look like he's got a jacked up eye.
Well, maybe. Maybe he offered it up to a raven, and the raven spat it out.
Ah. Instead of gaining wisdom from Odin, he
not from Odin. Odin's the one who gave up his eye.
Oh, right.
Anyway. What I was saying was that it wouldn't surprise me at all if they've just been prepping people to get more and more used to...
Well, yeah, they're slowly getting people more and more used to pedophilia. They had a TED Talks recently about a woman.
That was
by
years
this,
ago.
Was it?
It was a couple years ago at
Oh,
this point.
this woman who was totally advocating for it. It's a sexual orientation, and as long as you don't act on it, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
you know what? It's perfectly not fine, and y'all need some psychological help.
No, you need a bullet.
Well, you need Jesus. Is what you need.
Yeah. So, I don't know. We are very protective of our children. We don't put photos of them out there. We've removed every photo of them we can find. And apparently there are a lot of offenders in the town that we happen to live in. So I've gotten even more paranoid.
It's every town.
Yeah, my sister is one of those people who checks every time she moves to a different street.
Yeah.
But where was I going with that?
No idea.
I got lost because we were talking about Satanism and warming people up to stuff. Oh, so where we live, there are Wiccans, and around solstice, people on the community page start talking about going out and communing with nature and doing a bonfire. And last year, some woman talked about doing events and doing a bonfire and communing, and she got ripped to shreds. It was so funny. But apparently,
I wonder if she did go down there, because wasn't that day like rainy and foggy and lame?
I don't know, but it's Alaska. It's like that most of the time.
Yeah, which makes it even more funny because she's down on the beach in the rain and the cold and the dark.
Yeah, but apparently,
by herself.
But apparently, there is a growing pagan community in Alaska, and in one of the towns where some friends of ours live, they've warned us before that they keep an eye on their cat because cats have been going missing, and the police have actually gone and talked to a Druid community?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, gone and talked to them about these cats going missing. So people know, and it's not just, all innocent, fun stuff. From where I'm sitting right now, actually, someone has climbed up what looks like a sheer cliff on a mountain nearby, and painted a triangle with an eye that they paint red every now and then.
Is it a triangle and an eye? I thought it was just an eye.
It might just be an eye.
A poorly drawn one.
I think it was a triangle at one point.
Huh.
Regardless, somebody goes up there and repaints it every few
Seems like
years.
an awful lot of effort for a stupid eye on a cliff.
I saw a pentagram drawn on one of the community boardwalks a few years ago.
That could just be any bonehead kid with a rattle can, though.
True, and that's my feeling whenever people are like, oh, I found a swastika. Did I tell you about that? Some gay, native, something rather. I think there was another. It might have been disabled too. I think they were the trifecta. I think they were gay,
the golden
native,
trifecta.
Disabled. At a bus stop, they were like having heart palpitations and wringing their hands because they'd seen a swastika on the pavement, and everyone was patting them on the back. And this was during Pride Month.
So last month.
Yup. and everyone else was like, it's probably just some kid with a can of paint. Like, for goodness sake.
I'll bet you it was drawn backwards and not aligned properly either, because they always get the swastika incorrect.
Yeah. Well, and
not that I'm an expert, but,
One person's like, so you think that they drew it knowing that you were going to walk by and see it? So
yes, they targeted that person.
Yeah. So, I'm not so foolish to think that every time I see a star that it's a pentagram. But when you know that there is a community in town, you do have to wonder.
Yeah.
So, got really off topic there. But I think they're warming everybody up to it because, people are becoming more and more comfortable.
Yeah, and which is bad. It's bad that they're trying to put it in the mainstream and make it a light-hearted, acceptable thing for the masses. They're trying to make it palatable for everyone. They're like softening themselves up on the public front end, but the back end's not softening up. The upper echelons of the Satanic Church, they're not softening their beliefs. They have very strict beliefs, and they're not great. They're very bad. And if people really knew what was going on, it's a lot like the Masons. Oh, they're just a philanthropic organization that they contribute to such and such, and they go around town and build benches for the homeless, and come on, you really think the Masons? That's all the Masons do? Mm-hmm. No, they have checkerboard floors in their halls. I've seen it. Been to their hall here in town, and they have the stupid hats and the little kilts that they wear and the ceremonial swords. They do all the ceremonies. Mm-hmm. It's ritual magic. It's like soft ritual magic at the bottom and legit ritual magic at the top where no one sees it because they do it in secret places. So it's gnarly stuff. Satanism is the same way. They're trying to have this soft public-facing element so everyone can accept them like they do everything else. It's kind of weird and messed up because eventually it's just a fancy way. It seems like it's just a fancy way to hide the more aberrant things that they do in the dark, Yeah.
Well, on the more innocent end of it, it's probably a lot of atheists who want to have some feeling of religion or faith in their lives, but they hate God. So they have to have something, and it's proven all throughout history, and it's proven through the Bible. Any time that they're unhappy with God or they've forgotten about Him, they go and they make themselves something to worship.
Yeah.
It's
true. Well, I've been reading apologetics recently, and they talk a lot about how atheism is really just different. Philosophically speaking, it's just a different religion. It really is.
Tell that to Stephen Molyneux.
Oh, I know. They hate hearing it because they don't believe that, and it takes a lot of picking apart. Like, you really have to get someone who's attempting to be honest with themselves and with you. But once you get down to the actual philosophy of the thing, they have just as much faith as anyone else in things they can't see.
Well, you'd have to believe that nothing created all of this, that we're not intelligent in design. Takes a lot of faith.
Right. Well, the name of the book is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
Oh.
Because it actually makes more sense to believe in an intelligent designer and a creator when you get really, really down to brass tacks. It makes more sense. There's more actual tangible evidence for a creator than there is for no creator. Mm-hmm. But on the surface, it's so much easier to believe that science rules, and we can perform these physical experiments in physics and chemistry that turn out the same results all the time. Therefore, the physical universe is the only thing. But it takes an awful lot of philosophy to perform proper science, and a lot of those people aren't. Anyway, now we're really in the weeds.
So I don't really listen to Stephen Molyneux. Every time I start to think that I get frustrated because he's...
I think he's getting religiously red-pilled.
Maybe.
It's weird. Maybe. A lot of his recent posts are they have to do with Christianity and how suppressed Christianity, how prosecuted Christians are compared to Muslims.
I think he's always known that a little bit. I think he's always seen Christianity as a good thing in general, but I still think it's false.
Well, you saw that post I made recently about how he was talking about how atheism doesn't even allow for this sort of evil, and he had some photos up, I forget of what specifically, but it's interesting that he's using these more moralistic standards to describe a thing when he claims to be an atheist. You can't appeal to moralistic standards when you're an atheist because there's no higher being to provide the moral standard. There's no such thing as moral standard except for your own.
Well, so
you can't use the word evil if you're trying to be an honest atheist.
So that's what I was going to get at, is how do you feel about someone like that? Does Stephen Molyneux claim to be more moral than God? Because there are people who I can't believe in a God who would allow, etc., etc., etc. to happen. So do you claim a higher moral standard than God? Because God lets people have free will to do evil?
Well, if you don't believe God exists, then the only moral standard you have to go by is your own, but it's subjective. That's the problem with atheism.
Well, at that point it becomes, I don't like it because I would want it to happen to me, therefore it's immoral. But what would you say to... no one's gonna like this. A gay man wants someone to do something to him. Therefore, is that immoral when it's done to someone else?
Yeah, exactly. A sadomasochist wants to be beaten into submission, literally, with a whip.
is it immoral when it happens to someone else?
Right, exactly. Like the moral subjectiveness is, it doesn't work if humankind is the only person to put it forward.
Yeah.
It doesn't work at all because it's such a fluid thing. There are people who literally have submitted themselves to be killed and eaten by someone. They wanted that to happen to them.
Yeah,
on purpose.
I know.
Therefore, that person's morals applies as well, right? There's no standard. The whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
Atheism is goofballs.
Well, I remember a few weeks...
And to anyone in the audience, no, I'm not opening myself for debate over the internet. If you want to know what I believe, you can read this book I'm reading. I agree with most of it, except for the Big Bang stuff they talk about.
Yeah, I was recently asked on my personal account. It was one of those, why are you on Twitter? And I answered with, I'm here to get followers, so you guys will read what I write. That's it. I'm not here to talk about politics on this account. And they said, but what if engaging in politics gets you more followers, gets you more readers? I'm just like, if you want to know what I think, it's pretty obvious in my books.
Yeah.
You know,
but... Buy the book. Rub your hands.
Yeah.
Like a conniver.
Yeah, I mean, my worldview and morals are pretty plain, and I'm happy to talk about the things that I present there. I don't want to do it on my personal Twitter because I want a wide audience.
Yeah. Yeah. Wide, broad is better for you. For us, we're going narrow because a narrow audience is a dedicated one.
Yeah. So we really spun off. I mean, have we even covered everything we talked about last night?
No, there's more, but I don't really want to talk about these guys. I think this is a fair amount of content.
You don't want to talk about...
we can talk about this guy.
The other mind control people?
We can talk about them later.
Okay.
This is a lot to unpack. The MK Ultra stuff, there's many podcasts we can do on this specific topic. We could get specific on any part of it, and there's just volumes to talk about in every place. This is the primer. This is the lightweight surface level.
Well, you know, at a certain point, we're gonna have a whole bunch of primer episodes,
and we're gonna have to specify.
Yeah,
that's not true. There's a lot. Have you seen the list? Have you seen the list?
The list.
It's a big list. The list of topics I came up with for the earlier version of this podcast that we're on.
I don't think so.
It's long. There's like 140 topics.
Goodness.
and some of them are multi-level topics, like Roman Catholicism, the Catholic Church. Well, that's a multi-episode topic as well. No, I think we covered most of the stuff I wanted to touch on in here, except for those people we're not talking about.
I was gonna say back in the Kathy O'Brien thing that bothers me. I haven't looked into her very much. I intended to read that book, The Transformation of America, and I probably still will if I can find it. But a lot of books on our shelves, and they're all kind of they're
disarranged by our toddler.
Yes. But something that bothers me about that is how easy would it be for someone to rub their hands together and think, I can make money on this. You know? And we talked about that last night in regards to someone else. But it would take a lot of research. But if you decided that you were going to read the stories of other people, you were going to, read what was available about the experiments, and nobody would want to come out and, contradict you, if you accuse them specifically, or even, mention you, dignify it with an answer, you could really, probably make bank. And I assume that's probably what she and Mark Phillips did. And to get back to what we were saying about that girl that they have allegedly brainwashed, what are they doing now, her and Kathy, now that Mark is dead?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing to ask, because if he's still their handler and he still knows other people who are handlers,
but he's dead.
I know, but probably as soon as the news of his death came out, some other handler just swooped in and took him. That's the way the MK slaves work. Any handler they're programmed in such a way that code words are universal to the handlers. They know what to say and how to manipulate these people. They use hand gestures and they use code words, and they can bring alters in and out. That's why they're called handlers.
So here's a question. Do you think she actually is an MK Ultra slave, or do you think she latched on...
The young chick?
No,
Oh.
Kathy O'Brien. She latched on to something that she saw an opportunity in.
I don't know. I think the only way you'd really be able to get an answer for that, because I'm sure other people have done the research, is you'd have to compare to other people who claim the same thing and see if there's enough commonalities in the stories, and try and figure out if there's any like source material they're all getting their material from, you know? Because there's not a lot of people who have come out of that. There's
You can
one
find
other
YouTube
woman,
videos.
yes,
Be
but
like,
there's one other woman specifically, an older woman, who claims that she was in a really similar situation.
and I think we saw a clip of
I
that.
forget her name right now.
I think we saw a clip of that last night, actually.
Probably.
But something that we forgot to mention about the interview that she did, Shayla Miller, with Mark and Kathy, that the sisters had linked to and talked about. It's a long interview, so we skipped through it. But something that's weird about it is that they are apparently the ones who posted it, this interview, the German podcast or whatever it is. But they say that someone tampered with our video recording and deleted portions of this interview, but they didn't know we were also recording the sound. It's super weird. So portions of the video will suddenly stop freeze on somebody's face, and then the audio will keep going. But if you look at it, it seems out of sync. It seems off.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
It's really weird.
Somehow, portions of our video that was all one video, without breaks, I assume, got deleted.
So who deleted it?
How do you delete portions of a video?
who got hold of
It's one
it?
video file. If it's you know what I mean.
And who got hold of it? Weren't they the ones who recorded it and posted it?
Yeah, it's weird.
It's pretty
it doesn't-
bizarre.
Yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
And another thing that bothered me, to get back to talking about the abuse of children, is that they mentioned pedophilia at one point during the podcast, and the woman goes, because they're talking about Mormonism, and we're not Mormons. We do not ascribe to Mormonism. I don't know much about it. There's child abuse everywhere. Mm-hmm. So to say Mormonism slap, it's a bit heavy-handed. But she was talking about they don't have Mormons in Germany, and we don't really have pedophilia here. And I just looked at you like, oh, come on, lady.
Right.
Like,
she's very ignorant if she doesn't think
evil
there's
exists
pedophilia in
everywhere.
Germany.
And come on, Germany's now overrun with migrants.
And also, even before the whole Arab Spring migrant problem that they have now, it's old world Europe. There's generational secret societies and horribleness. Yeah, like generations old abuse come from there because it's the old world. They have the ancient medieval times to draw on from all the generational horribleness that's gone on. Well, here comes a toddler, so we're going to tie it up. Follow us on Twitter, and I guess that's where we'll end it.
Yep. Okay. Bye.
Okay, go to Hinterland's feed. Follow us. Okay, bye.